J. Edgar Hoover, the then head of the FBI, made it his absolute daily task to ensure that he knows the business of everyone in power. He built up such a history of profiles and dockets that J. Edgar Hoover became untouchable, even to a president. And we remember the multiple discussions between J. Edgar Hoover and the then John F. Kennedy, where many times John F. Kennedy tried to remove, specifically his brother Bobby Kennedy, who was then the Attorney General of the United States, refused to allow J. Edgar Hoover to continue because he knew J. Edgar Hoover carried critical dark information about the president. And what then happened in history is that they then called a stalemate, where one agreed not to touch the other, and the other made sure he is untouchable. I don't know, Chris. Sound familiar? So in my opinion, when dog eats dog, the one that wins is the one that chases the tail quicker than the other. There's no doubt that this current government, this current entity is under severe destruction, that there's a criminality, failed state aptitude, and the Zondo Commission, the Zondo who is now forgotten, this 3-year, 1.5 billion commission, declared it state capture in this country factually under judgment took place under the admittance of Cyril Ramaphosa. He was there. He got the 900 volumes of absolute drastic facts being put on the table of an entity that is so dark, so lost, that it cannot be denied. Now, Chris, question, where are the arrests? Where are the arrests? So you can imagine minister after minister who are failing. And I said it, Chris, I think you saw that clip that got 1.5 million views in a week, where I only asked the question, Becky Tele, you failed. This is not a problem. People fail. But you've got to acknowledge you have. You've got to understand that we need revival in the fight against crime. Get out. But he won't. And he won't because there are very, very clear reasons why. It is now very clear after the Zondo Commission came out that there was a massive factual state capture. Chrissy was the vice president. Now, if you know how the structures work within presidencies, there is no way that that person called Cyril did not know about the Guptas, did not know about the Sheikhs, did not know about state capture. There is no way that a vice president who has access to national intelligence, the South African Secret Service, and all of that, that he can stand in denial. The other problem is this continual matter of load shedding. You know what was the massive problem I've got with under the ice cream? Was while he's standing in Cape Town City Hall telling us that he has beaten, defeated, and handled load shedding. While we hearing this absolute utter rubbish, I'm getting messages on my cell phone, Chris, saying we just hit stage 3 again of load shedding. And while that's happening, they put the camera on the Minister of Electricity. I mean, Chris, this man has one job. Just one job. He's the Minister of Electricity. And while this man is clapping like a little seal because he's singing for his supper, we are getting messages that we've just gone to load 3, load 4. And I'm thinking to myself, Mr. President, he is the outgoing president, by the way. That is what I'm calling him. He is the outgoing president of the Republic of South Africa. This was his last sona, is that he is actually saying to us that he also stops load shedding. While when he was vice president, you will recall, this man was on the Energy Crisis Committee. And then he goes from that to saying that he has now stifled corruption. Only on those two. Corruption and load shedding. Only on those two. He lied. It's not true. And the problem, Chris, is that the wider public, the poorest of the poor, who can't even understand what they're saying at Sonar, who doesn't have the capacity to even attend Sonar, is sitting today again in a shack filled with mud, sewage running past them, no jobs, no hope, and all this man can tell us is that there's a brighter future. What a lot of rubbish. The ANC has no choice now to form a coalition. So that's a fact. They are at 40, just over %, which still makes them the biggest bloc singular in the country. So no doubt, everybody that sits here will need to do that. Unless the other total 60% of the whole country that participated forms a blocked opposition coalition. Because fact is, the ANC's got 40. So if all the parties that made it by a miracle decide to get together in one mega tent and say, put all differences aside, put all history aside, that is now the EFF, MK, PA, IFP, DA, Action SA, Freedom, all of them, all of the jelly tot, if they have to sit under one tent and go, bugger that, we're going to block them and get them out, well, then the ANC's opposition. Now, what are the chances that all these variable smarty colors in a box is going to do that? Well, Chris, I don't think so. I think power, greed, sentiment, tribalism, religious back, race is definitely not going to make that happen. Well, we don't know. People do agree we can walk on water, but I doubt now we'll sink to the knee. So here's the variable. ANC, main tent peg in the poll. Now, it's going to either be ANC, DA. Let's go there. So ANC, DA come together. Because, Chris, if the ANC wants to form a coalition outright, they need a party that has, hear me, a double digit. We spoke about that the last time. If they're going to do it and get more than 45, less than 51, they can only form a coalition then with a singular digit party that got between 0.1 and 9%. Then they would make it. Then they would go from 45 again to 51. Because they got below 45 and below 50.1, they now have to look for a party that has a double digit. In other words, 10% and over. So their problem is they've got a variable now of choices. So their choices are DA, their choices are MK, their choices are ANC. That's it. Those are the top ones. And the lingering PA that could also enter the factor. We can now paint this zebra any color again that we want. This is coming back black and white. It is shocking the amount of gunfire, the amount of killing that has gone on in the past 3 days in the Western Cape. And you know, the thing that I always say is there's a cliche, and I'm part of it. I stay here. It is a stunning city. It is probably a emerald or a diamond of the world. But in the back of it, behind this facade, murder, mayhem, and gang violence has overtaken, and in my opinion, as I said to a commentator this morning, it's out of control. It's out of control because you can see the video footage coming on Twitter, on everywhere. It's bursting. Someone said to me, but Neil, what would you do about it? Wrong person, to be honest, to ask. Because if you wanted me to go sort out this problem, like I kind of did a couple of years ago, then you must know there's only one way I would deal with this, and that is thunder and lightning. Ek sal donder weer afbring op hierdie kriminele. There's only one way to intervene, and that is to intervene, but with a almighty force. I would bring in the military, I would bring in the police, law enforcement, anybody that can carry a bulletproof license for a gun. I would bring them in. I would put a force of 5,000 people into this situation, and I would solidify it. I would take 3 months and I would wipe them out. Now, when you speak like that, people go, what about human rights? Luister vir my, human rights are hard. When you go and you are about to shoot one another and you kill a child and you kill an innocent person, I will take away your human rights. Probably just lost 950,000 voters. I don't care. There's one way that you deal with a criminal, you deal with him. Now, this is where I must tell you, we will have to sort out this government, because the longer we take to appoint a minister of police, a minister of defense, a minister of justice, that is as long it's going to take to see who they appoint, so that ons wragtig nou 'n lyn kan trek. Chris, we must pull a line in the sand with this, and it's going to take hard work, at times a cold heart, maar ons weet om met hulle te deel. And I'm sorry, it's not happening at the moment, and I am going to do whatever I can, because remember, I'm on the outside at the moment, to influence the inside. But our children cannot continue dying on the streets like this.
Well, Chris, funny enough, I said to a person about 3.5 years ago, when we were talking about matters of VIP protection, matters of state security, matters of politicians that stick out and are quite the norm of not being the norm. And he said, the fact that that man is still alive today in America is a wonder. And I said to him, yeah, it's been unbelievable. And our words were not cold in a couple of months. And there they go. So what a person has to look like is a lot of stuff. I've dissected it now. Again, the fact of the matter was people were actually, and it's coming out in the testimonies, people were actually screaming to certain outer lining state police, there's someone on the roof with a gun. So they actually saw the man 3 minutes prior to this volley of shots. And apparently the people did not heed. And the shots then came from an east to west direction, if Donald Trump was looking north, and struck him apparently on the side of the face. Unfortunately, also killing one member on the podium and also severely injuring another. What happened was, obviously, though, in front of everybody, the machine of the Secret Service, having been a person, Chris, in VIP protection that looks after the principal, the normal thing they do is they call it SMENS. We are trained to do SMENS. Shoot, move, evaluate, neutralize, scan. And that's what you do. When the shot is fired, you shoot, you move, you evaluate the surrounding, you neutralize whatever the threat is, you scan, and then you evacuate. So if you look at the normal principle of, can I call it, international standard of VIP protection, the Secret Service is absolutely trained to do so. But you can see, though, that they call them overlords. And those were the guys that came out with the long guns, the guys that came out in combat uniform. They are a special task force that are embedded in the Secret Service. So when the real deal gets down, you will see them appear. So here's the thing, Chris. You cannot deny that South Africa is becoming a hub, a center, a logistical conduit to terror. Now, in my last discussion, and in my discussion this week with several authorities, I made it very clear that the level of cartel movement, the level of drug shipping, the level of armament, the level of training, the level of cash flow is not just being said by current authority. The United States of America, who has for ambient time fought terror, fought cartels and fundamentalism in every part of the globe, has recognized that there are certain individuals currently residing in this country of ours that don't just speak to terrorists, engage with terrorists, but are funding them. Now, here's a statement, Chris. If you look at the current, and I'm saying where another flag came, when you look at the current, call it Spaza shops, call it Somalian shops, call it those shops that were around, I'm quoting verbatim from an article, that certain of these businesses whom are unregistered, illegally occupied, and only work with cash are currently being investigated for funding matters of fundamental terrorism in Africa via MoneyGram, via Telegram, via many methods that you move money. And Chris, that is why 2 years ago, South Africa was put on the grey list. They were put on the grey list because the globe and the financial services of the world said, your financial system in this country is absolutely not controlled and cannot be trusted. Now, how many, Chris, more tick boxes do you want to say to the South African authorities, hey, word wakker? It's not us that are just saying it. It is the US, it is the IMF, it is the World Bank, it is the world that are saying, listen, South Africa has become the new gateway to terror. And now, Chris, we better wake up. Because if we don't, the absolute terror now being caused in Mozambique, without a doubt, the horrific deaths and killings in DRC are going to come to roost in this country. I think it's a romantic innuendo. I think, let's say this is real, because seemingly it is. A young captain in the military of Burkina Faso, taking over obviously the military, but immediately saying that all members of parliament will get a 60% slash on their salary, and that he will not take a presidential salary, but he will remain on the salary scale of a captain in the military. Secondly, when the dogs of war, let's call them the wild geese, came in, Wagner being one of them, absolute mercenary dogs of war, and asked, can they maybe assist? He said,
keep him in power.
No, thank
thanks.
you. Keep your claws where you are. Secondly, he goes to international meetings in his combat uniform. And I laughed because he even kept his combat gloves on, shaking leaders' hands. He went in his fatigues. And secondly, the IMF, knowing the wealth of Burkina Faso, goes there with the president of France, because they are an ex-French colony. And he tells both of them, the IMF and the previous colonizer, to go to hell. But it comes in so hard that in actual fact they start closing offices. So here's a young man, and I don't endorse all of the scenarios, but let me quickly tell you, this man decided there's no question he's going to be a dictator, but he went to ground, he met the people, and the people agreed. When he asked to renew his leadership for another 5 years. Remember, this is a guy in military uniform that took over the democracy, that expelled all the people in parliament. The country said, we want you for another 5 years. So I don't know. But I think that he's not wrong in his attitude. It's time that people in their own vested country stop relying on the West, stop relying on the woke ideology, stop becoming this absolute liberal synopsis of ideology that we cannot stand on our own. But let me quickly tell you, Chris, for a country to say no to the World Bank, the IMF, the West and that scenario, it takes rugby baller. It takes every kind of playable ball to get up and say, no, we have our own gold, our own gas, our own oil. And here's the thing, the day that people in this continent, Chris, go from aid and remove that one hand from aid, you're going to hear it here first, to trade. It's one hand, Chris. Africa must stop doing aid. We must go to trade.
But what was he thinking, trying to blackmail President Cyril Ramaphosa into not signing the Bella Bill by threatening to walk out of a GNU?
Well, I think let's talk about that. I think there are two things I'd like to talk about that happened this week. This story about you and me picking a fight at school, and then at first break, I tell you, get me at the tennis court. Now, we get to the tennis court, but by then you and I have kind of calmed down. But your friends and my friends want us to murder each other. Now, we are looking at each other, kind of saying, no, we are okay. But because of pressure, we now have to slap each other. So now this is the same story that's happening in the GNU, and it's not going to bode well for us who are, can I call it, in the middle, that want to have peace, that want to just get on with it. So here's a classic. As soon as the DA and its partners, because now remember, the DA can no longer say it's them. They cannot say the ANC government. They are the government. Now, there are two things that happen which I find on the GNU absolutely pathetic. Number one, every time you're not going to get your way, you're going to threaten to walk out. Now, I was told by a very astute soldier one day, when you pull a gun, fire. You never threaten a person with a gun. You either tell the person you are going to shoot him if he doesn't stop, and then shoot him. When you take your gun out, do it. So this perpetual threat of, if we don't get what we want, we are going to walk out. This is becoming pathetic. So now we've got the Bella Bill, which we will address today, NHI coming up. I hope the understanding of land without compensation, all those things which the pre-part GNU parties brought to the table to say that we're going to save South Africa. We are going to remove the ANC. We will stand. Helen Zille says verbatim at one stage that the Bella Bill is a non-negotiable. Well, he signed
red line.
It's a red line. Well, they've passed it now. Now, what are you going to do? Move the red line. And as if here thou were trapped. Move the line. So number one, the GNU is based on a government of national unity. They put so much pressure on the DA, and then they get told, but if you sign it, we might take other options. What other options? So they didn't. They just let it get signed. The so-called Minister of Basic Education, a DA minister, decides that to absolutely protest against the signing. She's not at the signing. Now, in this week, an expert, a chemistry expert, got up and said that the law, Chris, is clear. No form of agricultural, chemical, or pesticide poison may be decanted and kept in any other format except the official packaging of such poison. That's like saying, don't bring a lighter to an atom bomb. It's horrendous that we've got people that are now standing back and saying,
we should shut down these places where we find these traces of poison. Now, if it wasn't this horrific, if it wasn't this sad that children died, children went into Spaza shops, apparently buying chips and chocolates and goodies as a child, and dies. And now we want to get up and say we are going to take action. Now here's the action a president should take, should have taken. He should have taken the army, the police, law enforcement, medication, people that are of state, and going with force. With force, Chris. Even if you have to set aside the bloody constitution. But going there, circle a place, shut it down, and clear them. And anybody transgressing must be facing the full force of the law. But now he comes up on TV to say the remedial action that he wants to take. I'm sorry, Cyril. Again, too little, too late. This is the kind of country, the kind of leadership, Chris, that we've got. And I'm sorry if I look at the multitude of leaders in this country. They don't inspire me. You must show yourself as a person that can get up and say, I will defend passionately the lives of the citizens of this country, no matter what it takes. Children died, people died because of a consequence, in my opinion, of a lack of governance in this country. Well, he's got to now shape up, and get this done. Because the citizens, slowly but surely, Chris, are taking the law into their own hands. And they only will do that because there's a shortfall of action of the government. And that's my opinion. Again, we're sitting with a president who has delayed reactions. And it seems, Chris, and I'm not insulting the man, I'm just saying this is his demeanor. If you're a president of a country, not only are you the president and the first citizen, but you are supposed to inspire the country to show them that you care, that you will defend them with what you have. And I'm sorry, every time that president comes on, it looks like he's either begging, he's sad, or he's got a piece of pop stuck on his face, and that does not inspire. I'm sorry, not my leader, not my circus, not my clown.
After 94, we broke up national intelligence, where we then said we would have the state security agency and NI. Our national intelligence system would then be domestic, and the secret state security agency, the SSA, would be foreign. We have seen categorically the collapse of that system, and the worst of it, what people did not recognize, Chris, which was a major flag to me when it happened, was that it was at first an independent ministry. And at one stage, Cyril Ramaphosa then brought the State Security Agency Ministry under the presidency. That's a red flag. So we've not had a minister of state security. We've had a deputy minister in the presidency running state security. That same conclave have now started to say, but we need a reassessment and a re-understanding. Hey, it's too late. How much have we as a country been infiltrated, bashed, have been attacked by the lapse of that very important entity? Because without intelligence, we don't have pre-warning. Without pre-warning, we have no planning. Without planning, we have no defense. And this is something that we need to watch. Chris, an intelligence officer can be trained the tricks of the trade. But one of the biggest assets of an intelligence officer, they call them spooks and spies and 007. But one thing that makes a great intelligence officer is time spent on the ground. And that's what we are worried about now, because they are going to be removed. So the purging of saying this is an opportunity to get rid of all the people that Zuma put into state security to protect him, that's one thing. But the release of so many people, the brain drain, I think is going to hurt our intelligence service.